Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ambassador Gold, how important was President Trump's decision to move the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem? Turn on your mic, please.
Well, that's not the subject today formally. It was extremely important and extremely appreciated by the vast majority of the people of Israel.
And we were told that it would create all sorts of havoc in the region, and it didn't do so. It seems to me that the same basic principles apply here as we're discussing Golan. So I think the point of that move being very positive in every way without creating the fear and the turmoil that was expected by some is a valid point for what we're doing now. Now we have Assad's regime, a campaign in southern Syria, obviously threatening Israel's sovereignty. What are the implications of that?
Well, again, the current campaign, which Assad's people say is to recover Syrian territory from ISIS, is really part of a much wider effort of the Iranian axis, which they call themselves the axis of resistance, to establish this land bridge across the Middle East, which will enshrine Iranian hegemony in the region. That should be our point of departure. And, you know, if some Arab states are not willing to come to this committee and extol the idea of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights, it's because our diplomatic work, and I was involved in Golan negotiations for the State of Israel. I was involved in contacts with the Arab states. You can reach agreements quietly, but not publicly on a lot of sensitive issues. I don't believe that suddenly Bahrain or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or the UAE would downgrade their relations with the United States because the United States recognized the Golan Heights as Israeli sovereign territory. To the contrary, you would be serving the interest of the anti-Iranian group among the Middle Eastern states.
Exactly, and that's why we have a role of leadership in this whole question. So how would the question of Golan sovereignty factor into what currently Syria is doing?
Well, there would no longer be a question mark about the Golan Heights, that if the Syrians could launch a surprise attack and seize some territory, they could move a diplomatic process that allows them to take Golan territory at the end of the day. That would be defeated. It would be clear that the United States is on the side of Israel staying on the Golan Heights permanently. And I think it would deter aggression rather than stimulate it.
I agree with you. Dr. Duran, let me go to you now with a similar but expanded question. What impact would U.S. recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights have pertaining specifically to Russia and Iran?
It would send a message to all parties, including the Russians and the Iranians, about what the United States expects the new Syria to look like. The Russians and the Iranians are working hard to create a Syria that is going to be a Russian and Iranian base of operations in the whole region. And this is one way that we can very powerfully say to them and to the Syrians that we don't accept that and that we have a different vision of the new Syria. And it would also condition our talks with the Syrian people and the Syrian governments in the future. You know, it was noted that the previous Israeli prime ministers sat down with the Syrian representatives and entertained the possibility of returning to the 4 June 67 line. Those talks were not simply bilateral Israeli-Syrian talks. Those were talks by the Syrians with the Israelis, very much with the intention of influencing Washington. And so Washington would be sending a message to the Syrians that if you want, to the future Syrian governments, if you want good relations with the United States and you want to sit down comfortably with the American-led order, it means accepting the Golan as part of Israel, and we would strengthen we would strengthen the Israeli governments, we would strengthen the backbone of Israeli governments, and we would take off of the agenda the possibility of rolling back Israel.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.